Why James Cameron's Avatar is not anti-military. In this lecture, Davy the Entertainer will delve into a comprehensive explanation, both thoughtful and insightful, that will attempt to rebut a very common complaint about James Cameron's Avatar, namely, that the film misrepresents America's armed forces and portrays America's military in an unfavorable light. And so, for tonight's entertainment, here is Davy the Entertainer on part 1 of this lecture. Hello everyone, and welcome to my very first video lecture. I go by the name Davy the Entertainer, and I will be your host for tonight's entertainment. Today we have an entirely new subject to cover, and it is going to be about James Cameron's Avatar, the film. Except in this case, I'm going to discuss a new perspective of Avatar concerning the military aspect of the film. And it is going to be about why James Cameron's Avatar is not anti-military. Now, I'm going to assume that those of you who are listening to this lecture have already watched the film. But I suspect some people have heard about it, but haven't really watched it. For those of you newbies out there who may not be familiar with the film, James Cameron's Avatar is the latest of his sci-fi epics. To make a long story short, Avatar is about a paraplegic Marine who is sent by an Earth-based corporation, the RDA, to a remote planet called Pandora to gather intelligence on its native inhabitants, the Na'vi, through the use of a hybrid native or avatar while blending in as one of them. However, his eyes open to the beauty of Pandora and its inhabitants, and he eventually sides with them in their fight to defend their home planet from human corporate encroachment. Before you continue watching this lecture, however, I recommend that if you have not seen the film, you should consider seeing it before listening/watching this lecture, because I'm going to include some movie details from Avatar that may be considered spoilers. It's a very recent blockbuster hit, so obtaining a copy of the film for your own personal use should not be too hard. You should be able to find the film at your local store, bookstore, online market, your local library, or even a website that allows you to watch the film online. For this lecture, the theatrical version of Avatar will suffice. If you have in your possession the extended collector's edition of Avatar, even better. However, if you have been viewing the latest articles and blogs reviewing the film that contain assertions of Avatar being anti-military, then at the very least you have gained some measure of familiarity of the film, and perhaps you would be able to understand the content of this lecture a little better. Now, my appreciation for Avatar goes much deeper because there are some values in the film that I actually like. As you might know, I happen to like Avatar very much, otherwise I would not be giving a presentation about it in the first place. And I bet you're probably wondering why I have such a geeky Avatar interest in the film, since I suspect most people usually watch the film to be entertained. There's more emphasis on entertainment and less on being educated in the sense that you learn something meaningful from watching the film. Well, a long time ago, I heard about the film back in late '09, the year when the film was released, but I never got around to watching it in the theater, primarily because of the myriad of accusations surrounding the film, such as the film espousing hatred for the military. Well, there were other issues too, which we won't delve into during this lecture, such as the film worshipping nature, and being anti-corporate, but the main issue was the film being anti-military. And I came from a family who, though none of my family members served in the armed forces, still respected the men and women in uniform. You say I live in Virginia, where you can see quite a lot of people who have and are currently serving in the armed forces. What little I learned about the film at the beginning of 2010 was from a video review made by an online film company called Red Letter Media, and its reviewer, Mike Stoklasa, commented on the film through a character of Mr. Harry S. Plinkett, who affirmed these same complaints that were, I think, heard around my family. And being the slightly impressionable teenager that I was, I naturally took them to heart. Almost a year later, I started watching a YouTube video belonging to a username called quote-unquote Penondrum, which refuted most of the claims that Mike Stacklasa made about Avatar being anti-military, too environment-friendly, and anti-corporate. And eventually I purchased a copy of the extended collector's edition of the film for my own viewing to see the details for myself. Interest in the film concerning the military aspect finally came at an all-time high when I was taking a public speaking course at my local community college, Germana, and my final project involved persuasive speech. I sifted through many different topics of my persuasive speech project before coming across the possibility of discussing why Avatar is not an anti-military film. I already chose that topic, but I needed to structure my presentation to fit my instructor's requirements, which needed a problem, a solution, visualization, and a call to action. I managed to do those things, and I managed to deliver my presentation all the way through. Well, not nearly all the way, as I reached the limit of my 7-minute delivery time, which did not allow me to get to my call to action. But in spite of that, I was guaranteed a good grade by my instructor because though my speech was 9/10 finished, I managed to meet most of the nuanced requirements of my speaking engagement, such as my tone, posture, and yes, let's not forget my professional attire, and all the other things that were listed in the requirements as well. However, I was still dissatisfied. I still wanted to convey my opinion of the matter in a much more comprehensive way. So I began writing a comprehensive version of my presentation. In this version, I can afford to be comprehensive because I'm not constrained by time limit. And unlike a live classroom lecture, you can pause and rewind this lecture if you need to. This comprehensive version is the one you're watching/listening to right now. So I'm going to give you an entirely new perspective of the film concerning the military, and it's going to demonstrate why James Cameron's Avatar is not an anti-military film. So before we take our next giant leap into the material to be covered, we will first take our small step toward our tour guide, known as the outline. And as the outline is showing you right now on the screen, it will become quite obvious that this presentation will be all about persuading the audience to shift their perspective from the notion that Avatar is anti-military. Our main points of discussion will cover military disparagement concerns, responsible military approaches, and a new perspective of the film. The entire lecture will be divided into 4 main parts. The first part will discuss military disparagement criticisms. It will delve into the main complaint of the film being anti-military, and will make an attempt, or as much of an attempt as possible, to rebut their claims. The second part, which will discuss responsible military approaches, will present in some detail, many of the approaches still practiced in America's armed forces that are exemplified in the film. The third part will discuss the new perspective of Avatar, in which the military virtues exercised by both the main protagonist and antagonist of the film will be discussed in detail, as well as the choices they made throughout the film. And finally, the fourth and last part, while bringing this entire lecture to a neat conclusion, will give the call to action following the lecture itself. So, brush aside your inordinate fear of Avatar. We are going to dive right in.